Dear you, there was a moment you remember clearly, not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet. You were in the middle of something ordinary. Nothing emotional was happening. No one was asking anything of you. And yet, you suddenly felt the weight of everything you'd been carrying. It wasn't overwhelming. It was heavier than that. It was familiar. You realized that you had been holding things together for so long that it had started to feel like your natural state. Being the one who stayed calm, the one who figured things out, the one who didn't need much reassurance. You didn't choose that role deliberately. You grew into it, slowly, as situations demanded more from you than you expected. At first, it felt empowering. You liked knowing you could handle things. You liked being dependable. You liked being someone others trusted. And every time you stepped up, every time you managed something difficult without falling apart, you reinforced the belief that this was who you were supposed to be. So you kept doing it. Even when it got heavy, even when it felt lonely, even when you noticed that no one asked how you were holding up. You didn't resent people for that. You assumed they trusted your strength. You assumed that if you needed help, you would ask. But asking never quite happened. Not because you didn't need it, but because you didn't know how to explain what you were feeling. You weren't falling apart. You weren't in crisis. You were just tired of being the one who always held things together. You noticed it in small ways. When you felt irritated more easily. When you felt drained after conversations that used to feel neutral. When you found yourself wanting space, but also wanting someone to notice you needed it. You didn't say anything. You kept it to yourself, the way you had learned to do. You told yourself this was just a phase, that once things settled down, you'd feel lighter again. That this was temporary. But things didn't settle. They just kept coming. One responsibility after another, one expectation after another. And because you handled them well, they kept landing on you. You became the steady point, the constant, the one who didn't crack. And somewhere along the way, you stopped checking whether you were okay with that. You didn't feel invisible exactly. People saw you. They relied on you. But there's a difference between being seen for what you do and being seen for what you carry. And the second kind of seeing was missing. You told yourself not to make a big deal out of it. You told yourself this was just how life worked. You told yourself you were lucky to be capable. But capability without support eventually turns into quiet isolation. If you're reading this and feeling that slow recognition spread through you, it's because this experience is shared by many people. They become strong because they have to. And once they're strong, everyone assumes they'll always be that way. You weren't wrong for stepping up. You weren't wrong for being strong. But you were never meant to do it all alone. This letter isn't here to take your strength away. It's here to acknowledge the cost of it, to sit with you in the moment where you realize that holding everything together has taken more from you than you allowed yourself to notice. You didn't lose yourself. You didn't fail. You just reached a point where something inside you wanted to be held too. If you trace this habit of holding everything together far enough back, you'll notice it didn't begin as a choice. It began as a response. A response to moments when things felt uncertain and someone needed to be steady. A response to situations where stepping up felt safer than stepping back. A response to learning quietly that stability often depended on you. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be the strong one. You became the strong one because it worked. Early on, you noticed that when you stayed calm, things didn't escalate. When you handled problems, they didn't linger. When you minimized your needs, situations moved more smoothly. Strength became a tool, and because it helped, you kept using it. Over time, that tool turned into an identity. You began to see yourself as the reliable one, the capable one, the person who didn't fall apart easily. And identities are powerful. Once they take hold, They guide your behavior even when no one is watching. You stopped asking whether you wanted to be strong all the time because it felt like who you were. You learned to regulate your emotions quickly, to process internally, to not ask for reassurance unless absolutely necessary. You told yourself you preferred independence. You told yourself you didn't like relying on others, and in some ways, that was true. But independence slowly became isolation. You didn't share your worries because they felt manageable. You didn't express your fatigue because you assumed it was temporary. You didn't ask for help because you weren't sure what kind of help you would even need, and because you were still functioning, you assumed everything was fine. This is how carrying becomes normal. You also absorbed expectations without realizing it. People came to you because you were good at handling things. They trusted you, they leaned on you, and each time you showed up without complaint, you reinforced the idea that you could handle more, so more arrived, not maliciously, not intentionally. Just naturally, and because you rarely said no, because you rarely slowed things down, no one questioned whether you were reaching your limit. You didn't question it either. Limits felt like something other people had. But limits don't disappear when ignored. They wait. They show up as quiet resentment, as emotional numbness, as the feeling that you're always on, even when you're alone, as the sense that no one ever really checks on you, because you never seem like the one who needs checking. Your past self understands now that this wasn't because people didn't care. It was because you taught them, without meaning to, that you didn't need care. You presented competence so consistently that vulnerability felt out of character. And vulnerability is often invited, not demanded. Another layer of this pattern came from fear, though you may not have recognized it as such. Fear of being a burden, fear of letting people down, fear of disrupting stability. You learned that holding things together kept relationships intact, kept situations manageable, kept life predictable. So you chose predictability over expression. But predictability has a cost when it requires constant self-suppression. You begin to feel unseen, not because no one is looking, but because no one knows where to look. You hide the parts of yourself that are tired, unsure, or overwhelmed, and then wonder why no one reaches for them. This isn't a failure of communication. It's a survival strategy that outlived its usefulness. Your past self sees now that you weren't wrong for becoming this person. You adapted to what life asked of you at the time. You did what made sense. You became who you needed to be to get through. But the version of you who learned to carry everything may not be the version of you who knows how to be held. And that realization can be painful, not because you regret who you became, but because you begin to see what you've been missing. Support, softness, the relief of not always being the one who keeps things together. This understanding doesn't demand that you stop being strong. It simply invites balance. It invites the possibility that strength and support don't have to cancel each other out. You can still be capable. You can still be reliable. And you can also be human. Recognizing this is not weakness. It's awareness. And awareness is where change begins, not abruptly, not dramatically, but honestly. I want to speak to you now without asking you to be strong. Not the kind of strong you've practiced for years, not the kind that keeps everything upright at your own expense. I want to speak to the part of you that has been waiting quietly, patient, tired, hopeful in a way that doesn't ask for much just to be seen. You don't have to carry everything anymore. Not all at once, not perfectly, not by proving anything. You've already proven enough. There is a misconception that letting go means things will fall apart. That if you stop holding everything together, chaos will follow. But what often happens instead is something gentler. When you loosen your grip, the weight redistributes. Some of it sets itself down. Some of it was never yours to hold in the first place. You are allowed to discover that. You are allowed to pause before saying yes. You are allowed to admit when something feels heavy. You are allowed to let people see you think, hesitate, rest. None of this erases your strength. It humanizes it. You might worry that if you stop being the reliable one, you'll disappoint people, that they'll see you differently, that you'll lose something important. But what you may gain is something you haven't felt in a long time: relief. The quiet relief of not always being the anchor. The relief of being met instead of expected. This doesn't require a dramatic declaration. You don't need to explain your entire inner world. You can begin with small permissions. The permission to not respond immediately. The permission to ask for clarification instead of fixing things yourself. The permission to rest without turning it into a reward you earn later. These choices may feel unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable. That's normal. You've trained yourself to associate worth with holding things together. Unlearning that takes time. Be gentle with yourself in the process. You are not selfish for wanting support. You are not weak for needing rest. You are not failing by choosing softness alongside strength. If you're reading this and feeling a quiet warmth where there used to be tension, it's because something in you recognizes the truth of this moment. You don't need to be carried completely. You just don't need to carry everything alone. You can still be dependable without disappearing. You can still be capable without being depleted. You can still be strong without being solitary. Imagine what it would feel like to move through your days with a little more space around your chest, to take a breath without bracing, to let moments land without immediately preparing for the next one. This isn't a fantasy. It's a direction one you can move toward gradually, in your own time. Some days you'll still default to old habits. You'll catch yourself stepping in, smoothing things over, taking responsibility automatically. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're learning. Each time you notice it, you create a small opening. And those openings matter. You have spent so long being the one who holds. Now, you can learn how to receive. Receiving doesn't make you dependent. It makes you balanced. It allows your relationships to breathe. It allows your inner world to soften. It allows you to exist without constant vigilance. You don't need to announce this change to anyone. You don't need to justify it. Just begin. Begin by letting yourself be honest in small ways. By acknowledging when you're tired. By noticing when you need space. By trusting that you don't have to do everything to be worthy of care. You are already worthy. You are always worthy. Before you became strong, while you were carrying everything. And now, as you learn to set some of it down, stay here for a moment. Let this truth settle. Let it be simple. Let it be enough. You don't have to rush forward. You don't have to fix yourself. You only have to stop holding everything alone. Sincerely, you.